Welcome, everybody, to the City of Farmers Branch Joint City Council Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Monday, June 9th. Our first order of business will be public comments, citizen comment. I don't have anybody signed up to speak. Comments?
Mayor, sorry for the interruption. I just need to call in
Yes, you
also
do.
that it is also a joint meeting, so it's also planning and zoning, so we'll call that to order. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you very much. And seeing no comments, we will move on to item C1, which is to receive a presentation from the city attorney regarding roles and responsibilities of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Just pull it up. Do I press go? All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Core. I'm one of your city attorneys with Wyatt Hamilton Finley. I'm going to give I've been told, brief presentation tonight, even though I have multiple slides. We'll go through some of those pretty quickly because I do understand that P&Z y'all recently had both your ethics training and your how to be a commissioner training. So I just want to do a couple, just highlight some points now that we have council with us as well. So I'll go through those pretty quickly. But the first thing I always like to do with planning and zoning is I kind of like to hear from each one of you, kind of your name and then your background. I found that very helpful with planning and zoning, like where, what you do on the daily, because that usually can actually help when you are sitting there and giving some of your, your comments to the cases you hear. So.
Hey, Nicole, okay, can you make sure that when you're speaking,
Just click your mic.
push the red button, look closer to you so we can all hear?
Thank you. Okay, so I'm Brianna Banks, and my background is healthcare. Now the funeral service industry. Okay.
Again, can you repeat the question? Because it is sort of hard to hear. And you're talking away from the microphone. So just want to make sure. What was the question?
So I'm just going through, I'm just trying to have each commissioner introduce themselves and give us a little bit of their background. I find that's helpful, especially with commissioners. So next.
Colin Kirby, professionally been in sales for about 12 years. I've lived in Farmers Branch for 5 years. One child and another on the way. So just interested in seeing what we could do to serve the community that we live in.
Great, thank you.
Holden Soltzbaugh. I grew up in the city. Glad to be back. Just started a family here. I work in construction, insurance, and bonding.
Okay.
Harold Freilich. I'm retired. I've lived here for 37 years. This is my second tour of Planning and Zoning Board. I served on the council for 9 years.
Okay. Next.
I'm Pat Trapp. I'm a retired software project manager. And I've been at Farmers Branch for 5 years now, but in the Dallas area for about 45 years.
All right.
Hi, I'm Marcus Miller. I own a small ad agency and a video production company. Been in Farmers Branch for 12 years now. And I just one of the things that I like about doing this is just like this, get the opportunity to meet people on a deeper level. So,
Thanks. Howdy, Nicole. Amber Rayleigh, and I have had a couple of careers in industrial organizational psychology, working as a consultant and HR advisor. Also, presently serve at Dallas College doing student success research, helping ascertain what helps our students to be successful and hopefully doing more of that.
And I'm also working on a PhD presently in urban planning and public policy with an emphasis in transportation planning.
Well, that will be helpful. Have you been on P&Z before?
This is my
PZA?
first role in P&Z here in Farmers Branch. I did previously serve other appointed positions formerly when I was in Atlanta, but more at the local community level. Atlanta is unique in that it has neighborhood planning units, NPUs, and I served there as part of an NPU.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate that. So now you kind of get a little bit of who your commissioners are, and as cases come up, some of y'all will have a unique perspective on some of those, so it will be helpful and maybe even help with that dialogue. Okay, so what is a planning and zoning commission? So by state law, since Farmers Branch is a home rule city, they can regulate zoning, and they have created the commission to help with those zoning decisions. We've also codified it in our local ordinance. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Farmers Branch Code of Ordinances. Hopefully you are. On Farmers Branch Muni Code, that's where we keep them all. And so this section 2-236 to 243, that is specific to the P&Z Commission. It kind of sets forth how you guys are appointed, who appoints you, what your terms are. You'll see I have an asterisk there. Currently, it's 3-year terms with a 2-year consecutive term limit. Actually, on June 17th, it's coming to City Council to actually amend that, and they will be 2-year appointments with 3-year consecutive terms. So I just wanted to highlight that council will be considering that at the next council meeting. One thing that is important is your quorum. So 4, including any alternates sitting in the place of absent regular meetings, what that means is you have to have at least 4 people here to have a meeting. That's what your quorum is. And then any action requires affirmative vote of 4. Now, anytime I say action for P&Z, you always need to remember you are an advisory committee. So what you're doing is not actually taking an action, you're making a recommendation. So everything that happens with you is a recommendation to City Council. And obviously, you guys are subject to the Open Meetings Act. That will become important with some of your other training you may have seen. We'll get into a little bit more. But just the rule of thumb is everything should be discussed in the open. Nothing, no sidebar, no side comments, because you're here for the citizens and for the public, and they need to know everything that is going on. Unless we're in executive session. Am I done? Is that my cue? Only made it to one slide. Okay, so staying within the P&Z roles and responsibilities. Why this is helpful, because as a advisory board, you are somewhat different than, let's say, City Council, who's the actual action board. And so you always need to keep in mind, what is your actual role and duty here as a P&Z commissioner? And again, in your local ordinances, this is where it sets it out. You're to carry out the duties and powers provided by the comprehensive zoning ordinance. State law, you approve plats, and then any other powers that the City Council may give to you. But for the most part, you're going to be doing zoning cases, and you're going to be seeing plats. Where the zoning authority comes from, again, is the Texas Local Government Code. That is what gives home rule municipalities the authority to make zoning decisions about what happens within the city borders. But here's where you need to make sure that when you're looking at these cases, what to keep in mind is that your regulations, as you're deciding, they need to be uniform for each class or kind of building in a district. And they can vary from district to district, but again, you need to be uniform as much as you can. And then obviously you will adopt these with reasonable consideration for the character of each district, the peculiar suitability for particular uses, and the view of conserving the value of buildings, encouraging the most appropriate use of land in the city. So just a side note, I do find that Planning and Zoning Commission is actually a very important role for cities, because you are setting up the city. The streets that you see, the buildings you see, the businesses you see, the houses that you see, most if not all of those come to you guys. And you are the ones who are basically the planners of the city. And here's what you can do. Location and use of buildings, the height, number of stories, percentage of a lot that may be occupied. I don't know if you've seen any of those cases before about percentage of lot coverage, size of yards, population density, those types of things. And then obviously your regulations must be adopted in accordance to your comprehensive plan. Now, your comprehensive plan, I understand that City Council approved theirs in 2023, I believe. So we have a pretty recent comprehensive plan. But Sarah Bergman, who's a director of planning, anytime you have a question and when she presents those cases to you, she will let you know what the comp plan says for that specific district so we can stay within the parameters of the comp plan as adopted by City Council. So the zoning amendment process. So I will say, as I was putting together this presentation, the zoning process in Farmers Branch is quite complicated, more so than most cities. But this applies to most cities, I will say, as far as this zoning amendment process. So there's a 10-day notice that goes out. You'll hear reference to the 300 foot, it used to be 200 foot, this 300 foot notice area. What that means is when a case comes up, city staff is going to send a notice to everybody who lives within 300 feet of the zoning case. And the purpose of that is to notify the neighbors, like, hey, this is coming forward. They're asking for whatever this zoning change is, and gives them the opportunity to come in, to opine, because it will affect them because they are a neighbor. Then you will hold a public hearing. You will make a recommendation to City Council to approve or deny. Then there is a 15-day notice newspaper publication before it goes to City Council for final consideration. And then they will make the final approval, whether to accept your recommendation, to approve or deny. One thing to note, if owners within 20% of that notice area that I mentioned, which is actually limited to 200 feet for this particular purpose, if 20% oppose the zoning amendment, then it will require a 4 out of 5 voting members on council to approve. The idea being the majority of the neighbors don't want it, and so in order for them to override the neighbor's voice, it would need to be a 4 out of 5 vote. And I'm sure you've seen the SUPs. These come through quite a bit to planning and zoning. What that is a specific use permit. It's something that's not otherwise allowed by right in your zoning ordinance. And so they come to you asking for this SUP, saying, here's a one-off. We're asking, even though it's not allowed by right, we want to, just for this particular piece of property, we want to be able to do this otherwise allowable with an SUP use. And so one of the things you're going to look at, you'll see it requires both P&Z recommendation, City Council approval, is when it comes to P&Z Commission, when you look at SUPs, you can ask for certain types of information, but it is limited to applicant plans, information, operating data, and expert evaluation. So that's one thing you need to kind of also keep in the back of your mind as a P&Z Commission, because you don't have the broad role that council does in actually approving it, you're a recommending board. You only need to ask what's necessary to make the decision. So anything that's unrelated to the SUP before you in the use would be what we consider out of bounds for questioning. And so that's where your city attorney, I like to say, we're the bumpers in the bowling lane. And we'll keep you within the lane. Platting. So when I talked about Farmers Branch being somewhat unique, you have a subdivision ordinance. However, it's not codified in your code of ordinances currently. It's actually on the planning's website. And so I did look through it. It's very comprehensive once you figure out where it's located. But that goes through how you do the platting process. Now, platting is somewhat unique here in Farmers Branch in that only the P&Z considers plats. Those do not ultimately go to council. And the other things you need to know about plats, this changed a few years ago in the legislature, but essentially if a plat request comes through and staff looks at it and it complies with all the city ordinances, you as a body have to approve it. Only if their staff comes through and says, it doesn't comply with this or with that, then you can either approve with conditions or you could deny it. But under either scenario, there are very specific requirements of letting the applicant know why it was approved with conditions, what those conditions are, or if it was denied. The idea being that these developers have very good lobbyists, and so when they went to the legislature, they wanted it to make it so that it was very easy for their plats to get approved. because they were getting stalled out at P&Z and at council. So planned development districts. So again, somewhat unique to Farmers Branch, but the majority of Farmers Branch is located in a PD. And so most of the cases you will see is a change in a PD to a specific site. And so that's where this process comes up. So these chapter 94, section 5.3, this is your comprehensive zoning ordinance, which again is on the Muni Code, which you need to be familiar with. But basically a PD think of it as like an overlay district. It's customized just for that specific area. And within that PD, city council can put whatever parameters they want on it. You can regulate where the buildings are located, the height, the materials, things you would not otherwise be able to under the comprehensive zoning ordinance. And so in order to create or amend a PD, it does require P&Z recommendation and city council approval. Again, you can establish those custom development regulations, and it typically includes what we call a conceptual site plan. And then you have the detailed site plan. So this is when you have a PD, it's already set up, and somebody comes to you, and within that PD, they want to change that zoning, or they want to build a new building, they're going to retrofit a new building. So they're going to come to you, and they have to provide what's called a detailed site plan. And I will do my best to explain this process, but Sarah Bergman is obviously the expert on this. But essentially, these DSPs, either staff can sometimes approve those just administratively, or they will come to you, or they will come to you and city council. It is somewhat specific to the site and the request. One example that Sarah provided is this PD 86, which is your station area area. And so I understand that if a DSP comes through for that area, P&Z is the only one who hears the case. Is that correct? Okay. Now, general rules and guidelines. This is where I'm going to kind of go from what is our role, what are we here to do, to how do we do it. So this is just your meeting procedures. Obviously, your chairperson is the one who runs the meeting. She's going to call it to order. She presides over the meeting. She is going to ensure that we follow any rules of procedure that you may adopt, which you can. I understand you haven't yet, but you do have that opportunity. I'm a big fan of rules of procedure. Just throw that out there. She also will recognize motions and things like that. So she's there to kind of guide the meeting, so to speak. These are just best practices again. So regulating talk. People are going to disagree. It's going to happen, right? That's why there's 7 of you. It's because everybody's going to come with a different perspective. And it's an open dialogue. So have that discussion. Have those hard questions. That's what you are here for, because you are going to be making the recommendation to council. So again, you can have that open dialogue, but let's not be petty, right? Let's not have personal attacks on people just because you don't like their opinion. That's not what your role is here to do, and that doesn't serve the public. We need to, treat all persons similarly that come before you. That's one thing you always have to keep in mind, is you're looking at the use, not the user. So it could be that you just don't like that person. Doesn't matter. You're here to just figure out the use that they bring before you. Is that what's best for the city? Is that what fits in that PD or in that district? And then also, too, kind of tangential to the Open Meetings Act, is all discussions need to be on the record and into the microphone. So no sidebar conversations with each other from the dais. Again, we have the Open Meetings Act. Everything needs to be discussed in the open. And when you start sidebarring comments, it's not picked up. Then you get well, what are they talking about? All the conspiracy theories start churning up because it's politics. So I would just recommend to always speak into the mic. Make it known. I mean, that's what you're here to do. Public hearings. So public hearings, we will open a public hearing. People can come up, they can share their opinion. It's usually restricted to 3 or 5 minutes. I'm not sure if the P&Z are 3 or 5 minutes. 3 minutes. They can give presentation, they can give their opinion. I will tell you that P&Z is where we get a lot of lively public comments, especially on some zoning cases. And I've been there for 7 hours before hearing about drainage issues at a P&Z meeting. But this is their opportunity to speak. I mean, this is the process. So we let them have their opinion. One thing, your chairperson is going to be running the meeting, but during public comment, we don't engage with them. We let them say what they're going to say. They're not allowed to ask questions of staff. That's not what the public hearing is for. Now, you can ask questions of speakers, like, for example, who's presenting, if it's their case. This is where the open dialogue happens. You want to ask them, well, tell me about this, or, what are your hours of operation going to be? That is the dialogue you can have, is with the person who's actually presenting. And again, under the state law, you have to look at the overall picture, and you're basing your decision on this basic land use principle, not your own personal opinions. And I have the ethics and conflicts of interest in here. I know that you guys just went through this ethics training, so I don't want to beat a dead horse here. But one thing to highlight is in Farmers Branch especially, there is a separate code of ethics, and you guys as commissioners are actually bound by that same code, just like your city council is. So I would recommend that you read it, you know it. Rule of thumb is just try to be above board on everything you do. You're always being watched, right? And so we got to take our job seriously and do the best job we can for the citizens. As long as you keep that in mind, you're usually pretty good. As far as personal conflicts, I will tell you this comes up a lot in planning and zoning. The reason why, because this notice area, you live here, you're going to get a notice. It's going to happen. And so when that comes up, my recommendation is just to call your city attorney. The reason why is because these are very fact-specific scenarios, whether or not you're statutorily conflicted out, or if it may just rise to look, just looking bad. I can give you tons of examples where these have come up. And while maybe under state law, it wouldn't have qualified for a conflict, once we flushed out the actual facts, we actually recommended that particular council member abstain from that case. She wasn't happy, but she did. And again, it just applies to you, so make sure you know it. And this is where it's located. Open Meetings Act, I just want to touch on this. Where this comes into play, especially with you guys, is when you're not sitting at the dais. So a case is coming up before you, and you really want to talk to your other commissioners about it, and you really want to know how they feel about it. You can, as long as there's no more than 2 of you having that discussion. So what we don't want to have is a unnecessary quorum not on the dais. So this can happen because you text one commissioner, then that commissioner texts another commissioner, that commissioner texts another commissioner. Now you have what's called a walking quorum. That is a violation of the Open Meetings Act. I'm not saying that you can't have open dialogue with your commissioners, but I would always recommend say, hey, let's have this dialogue when we get to the meeting. Let's talk about that from the dais. Because again, everything needs to be happening in the open. One thing that may come up are executive sessions. They do come up every once in a while with planning and zoning. And so there are a handful of exceptions to the open meeting. And that would allow us to have a discussion in executive session. A lot of times this is going to be to talk to your attorney, get legal advice. That's really the most time you're actually going to see it in P&Z. And we'll go into executive, only certain people are allowed in there. And I call it the cone of silence. So whatever is discussed in that room needs to stay in that room. Because if you walk out and you talk about anything that was said, anybody's perspective, opinions, you are breaching confidentiality. Not only my confidentiality that I don't want you breaking, but also too, it could be a criminal act because that's a violation of the Open Meetings Act and it is punishable. Again, this just goes back to scaring you guys to please don't disclose what's talked about in executive session. And And then the Public Information Act. I just want to briefly highlight this in that you guys could be what is considered a temporary custodian. So I don't know if y'all have social media pages or if you have a city cell phone or how you communicate with your commissioners, but just know if somebody was to do an open records request for all commissioners, emails, text messages, you would actually have to search your personal devices for any of that information, because once you start talking about a city topic, it now belongs to the open records. So what will typically happen if that comes through is you will get an email from either the city secretary or from one of the city attorneys saying, hey, we got this request. Let us know if you have any information that would be responsive. Please let us know within 10 days. So that may come up, but if it ever does, or if you have any questions, just reach out. And I did it in under 30 minutes. Do we have any questions? I apologize, I talk fast.
Just one quick clarifying question, and I was referring back to my notes from a previous training, so I just want to make sure that I understand it right. In regards to the 20% rule, my understanding is that's 20% of the owners of the area, so that 20% is by area, not by number of people.
Correct.
Okay. I think the way I heard you say it, it could have been just the way I interpreted it was number of people, so I just wanted to make sure.
It's
not a
20% of
majority of
owners of the area within the 200 feet.
Right. Thanks.
So for example, you could have, let's say, 3 properties within that 200 feet, and they're all owned by 2 people. And so it would be the 20% of those 3 properties. Does that make sense? Instead of 3 separate people, it'd be
Yes, the area. Yes, the area of land.
yes.
Great.
And it is on that particular topic. Remember, it's 200 feet for the 20% rule to kick in, even though we do what would you call it? Courtesy notice. We do a courtesy notice of 300, but that 200 is the only one that state law requires to kick into that 20%.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Anything else on that? No? No? Okay. Moving right along. Next up is item C2, receive presentation providing an overview of the adopted long-range plans, including Farmers Branch 2045 Comprehensive Plan and the I-35E corridor vision study.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Commissioners. I'm Sarah Bergman. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning. And with me tonight, we also have Brett Mangum, who's our lead planner, and Brian, who's the planner with our team. So we are excited to talk to you all about the long-range plans that are in effect in Farmers Branch. These are documents that I think everyone is familiar with. We reference them in zoning cases. But given that we've had some new members join our council and our commission since the plans were adopted, we really wanted to take this opportunity just to refresh on the plans, talk about where we are in implementation, and see if there are any questions. And so before we get started, the main takeaway that I want to point out is that these are plans that were shaped by feedback from the community. And so both the Farmers Branch Comprehensive Plan and the I-35 Corridor Study took place over more than a year, which involved public engagement, drafting, and public hearings. And so the vision and the recommendations set forth in the plan are kind of a culmination of that feedback. And they're not, overnight fixes by any means. These are long-term 20-year vision documents. So we'll start big picture with the comprehensive plan. This was adopted in August of 2023. So it's about 2 years old now. And this is that 20-year vision that the comp plan sets out. And so it's shown on the screen here. It places an emphasis on high quality parks, trails, and services, and retaining a small town feel even in the middle of the Metroplex. And so these were the values that the community told us were important through that public engagement process. And then this is further broken down into guiding values, which I'll go through on the next slide. At the bottom, you can kind of see a snapshot of that public engagement process. We had hundreds of responses, both in person, online, and through workshops in the community. These are the 7 guiding values that are identified to support that vision. Each one hits on a different topic area, but you can see the themes of parks, connectivity, housing, shopping and dining, diversity, redevelopment, and business all connect back to that 20-year vision statement. And then as you go through the plan, you'll see some key elements include a overview of current demographics and trends called Farmers Branch Now. And then there's going to be a chapter dedicated to housing, economic development, mobility, and future land use. The future land use section you've definitely seen before through the zoning process. And so typically this map is what's shown as part of those presentations. This is called the future land use map, and it's just a framework for how development may occur in Farmers Branch over the next 20 years. This is not zoning. It does not bind council or the commission to any recommendation or decision, but it is meant to be used as a framework for consideration as we look at new development in the city. And similarly, the STEP analysis calls out key areas that provide opportunities to either strengthen, transform, enhance, or preserve. And there are a couple of key what are called catalyst sites that are called out by the plan. These are areas that are considered specifically located for either investment, redevelopment, provide some good opportunities to create dynamic spaces and stimulate economic growth. And so the 5 areas are our east side, the Josie and Bellwood area, the Beltline Corridor, Mustang Station, and Four Corners. So in the plan, there are recommendations and analysis for each of these areas. And then now that the plan has been adopted, we are in what's called the implementation stage. The idea here is that when we are looking at projects and zoning changes and development implications for Farmers Branch, that the comp plan would be a guideline that we refer back to. It's not meant to be a prescriptive list of projects that must occur at this date. It takes into consideration, council priorities at the time, funding availability. It understands that development conditions can change over time, so it's not meant to be a static document, but it is meant to be updated over that 20-year time frame. And so when you look through the projects that are recommended in the plan, they're going to be broken down into short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and then there is going to be a connection point back to those guiding values. So just an example of what that looks like in the plan. This is the decision-making framework. On the left, you can see the guiding values listed. There are some questions that can be asked with development decisions that connect back to the guiding values, and then some measurables to see if those decisions are having the impact that is anticipated. And then this further connects the top 5 strategies for each category back to the guiding values. And then the most level of detail is going to be found here in terms of action steps, timeline. It pulls in departments that would be involved, funding sources potentially, and this again is a guide for if this project is something that the city and the council wants to undertake. Here are some resources that can be used to make that happen. And then just a quick look at implementation that is going on right now. There are several initiatives of the council that are either in progress or have been recently discussed that do line up with the comprehensive plan recommendation. And so that's going to include your Builders of Hope partnership, the Dallas County Replacement Housing Project or Program, the Demo Rebuild Program, and the Active Transportation Plan. And then looking ahead, there's always opportunities to look at catalyst site investment, regulatory process improvements, missing middle housing options, and I-35 corridor study. Again, this is not a required list. It's just a framework that is included within the comp plan that has been guided by that community input. So we want the commission and the council to be aware of the plan, to understand how to utilize it. And of course, we are a resource for any questions. And just lastly, the way that implementation happens with the comp plan is through links to our other guiding documents, such as the strategic plan, our annual budget, policy updates, reporting, and development decisions. So the comp plan is not meant to sit on the shelf. It's meant to be referenced and used as a tool as part of our other processes. So I will stop there for now before we get into the I-35 plan, just to see if there are any questions or comments on the comp plan.
Thank you, Sarah. Folks, anybody have questions? You should.
I'll just open with a comment, which is, as always, thanking our staff for their diligence and work on these, and a reminder to folks that our Interstate Highway 35 East Corridor Virginia was award winning. The implementation steps that we've taken thus far, particularly PD 86, I think will really help create a welcoming and connected way for folks to access the city of Farmers Branch.
So I'm just going to add to that. As was alluded to, this plan, it's not the Holy Bible, it's not binding, but it does provide a framework that we should be working under or utilizing in order to make our decision. This framework was created with lots of citizen input, and so it's fairly current in its information, even though it took well over a year, close to two, to gather all the information that went into it. I don't think either one of our groups, the City Council or the PNC, can function or be as good as they can potentially be if they're not asking questions. Asking questions is the key, and asking questions of staff is imperative. We, all of us on both sides of the table here, are not professionals at any of this. Sarah is the paid professional hired by the city to provide answers. And of course, sometimes we don't know the questions to ask, and that's okay. But if we ask enough questions and have enough dialogue, then we'll get the answers that we need in order to make the right recommendations to council. Council will get the right information in order to make a decision on whatever the item is at hand. But it's that asking of questions that I think is so important. So the floor is open if anybody wants to comment on any of this.
Okay, I'll go. I joined the P&Z right as this comprehensive plan was getting finalized. And it was kind of like trying to drink through a fire hose, absorbing all of that material and providing feedback. And you just went through a ton of information here right now. There was so much information on the slides. I get through a little bit and then go to the next slide. But there's a lot of material to cover, and it was a good overview, and I appreciate it. But there's a lot of information there, and it's just hard to soak it in a short presentation. But it's something to sit down and read over instead of watching a 3.5 hour football game. You know? So, but it's a good read, and I think nobody agrees with 100% of that plan, right?
Correct.
And there are many things in there which I didn't like at all. But I think for the most part, I think it's a good plan. So it's something we can all agree to try to support.
But to your point, I think it's important that everybody on both sides review it, become familiar with what's included in it, so you have that tool at your disposal when you're considering something that comes before council. And we don't want to operate in a vacuum, so having this information is really important. Anything else?
If there are no other questions on the comp plan, we can get into the I-35 study just a bit. This does narrow in scope to a specific area, and this was actually adopted before the comp plan. So this was from February 2021, but it remains in effect even with the comp plan adoption. So this is the specific area that's included in the study. It's about 463 acres. And similar to the comp plan, it does lay out a vision statement for development in this area. Specifically focuses on creating an attractive gateway into Farmers Branch and allowing a mix of uses that can promote growth and economic stability in this area. Similar to the comp plan, This was a public engagement process. It started right at the beginning of COVID, so a lot of it happened virtually, but there was some pretty good response. 530 survey responses, 17 stakeholder interviews were conducted. And just like the comp plan, this does narrow down into specific goals, which are shown here. The goals are to create a modern urban industrial district, to extend the station area, to improve the appearance of the corridor, to add green to the corridor, and to connect the Farmers Branch community on both sides of I-35. And then you'll see in the plan certain target areas are called out. The existing station area is shown here. Target area 1 is this area on the west side of 35 where we recently saw an expansion of the station area code. Target area 2 and 4 both are adjacent to I-35, and then target area 3 gets a little bit closer to the Valwood residential area. And when we talk about implementation of the I-35 plan, there are several initiatives that have already been completed or are in progress right now. These are things like the Valley View and Valwood betterments projects that are under construction currently, the creation of TIF 4, which will be a funding source for future improvements in the area, and then again, the approval of the Target Area 1 rezoning in April of 2023. So looking ahead, the plan also recommends rezoning for target areas 2 and 4. That would be a public hearing process. And that's the reason that we have the plan document in front of you today, because we want to allow a good amount of time to get familiar with the recommendations, to understand the context of the plan. And that way, when this does come forward for further direction from council or further discussion, we have a good baseline for why these changes are proposed. Target Area 3 is also recommended for rezoning, but that is something that requires a little bit further study. That is intended to be a creative district with a mix of uses. So the plan envisions target areas 2 and 4 rezonings happening first. Narrowing in on target area 2, it's really just a one block area shown here between Havenhurst and Squire Place. And the plan actually acknowledges that a lot of redevelopment is not actually envisioned in this area. It's unlikely that these buildings will, on their own, be primed for redevelopment. These are large industrial footprint buildings that will likely remain in place for years to come without some sort of outside movement or influence there. And so what the plan focuses on is ways to improve the appearance of the existing area, ways to implement landscaping along the corridor, streetscape improvements, and then also encourage a bigger mix of uses that could include creative uses, studios, event spaces, warehousing, and e-commerce. And so the rezoning here would be focused mostly on land use and on appearance. And here in the plan, you'll see some constraints and opportunities called out. Some of those constraints, again, difficult to redevelop without land assembly. There is a transmission line that runs down Denton Drive, which creates some barriers for redevelopment. And then the one-way traffic, obviously, on the service road. And then on the left, you can see what's kind of envisioned an opportunity to just add landscaping and kind of beautify that corridor as an entrance to Farmers Branch. Maybe there's opportunities for public art. Those are the types of things that the plan discusses and recommends. Similarly, for target area 4, this moves north a little bit and is between Squire and Valwood Parkway. You can see these lots are significantly more narrow. Most of them have double frontage, which makes redevelopment challenging without assembling multiple parcels together. And the plan envisions this as a restaurant and retail corridor with more emphasis on entertainment type uses and restaurants. And so these are the constraints and opportunities. The left really illustrates it well, the number of parcels that are in this small stretch, as well as the types of uses that currently exist. And so the ideal situation would be to see some land assembly there and larger redevelopment, but getting zoning in place that supports that is a great first step to realizing the plan's vision. So that's just a kind of a quick overview. Of course, the next step would be to seek direction from City Council to see if these rezonings are something that align with current council priorities, if this is the right time to move forward with review and public hearing for those, or if there's some additional feedback we could receive from council on the front end before continuing the study. If this is something that were to move forward, the next process would be a public hearing involving notification of all property owners and then discussion with P&Z and City Council. And of course, there are, like the comp plan, opportunities to continue tracking implementation projects, to partner with TxDOT and look for opportunities to enhance the corridor in creative ways, and then looking at future alignment in Target Area 3. So again, that's the plan that's in front of you. Please take it home and spend some time getting familiar with it. If you have any questions, we're available as a resource and would love to help discuss the plan recommendations. But are there any questions we could help with or answer today?
I do have just one. Recently, I've heard discussion of the station area being the official downtown of Farmers Branch. And so, can you just talk about that? Like, what does that mean, that it's the official downtown?
Absolutely. That is let me get back to that map. That is kind of the name of the form-based code in that area. Is the entire area is envisioned as a downtown. Farmers Branch does not traditionally have a downtown. At one time, that might have been the Four Corners area, but today this is an area where the city has established a central location for redevelopment. There are a lot of exciting things going on in the station area. The DART station offers a transit option that wasn't there previously. And so all of those factors kind of started this idea of the station area being the downtown of Farmers Branch. And this code has actually been in place since like the early 2000s.
Did you have to apply? Did we apply to something to make it the official downtown to be able to apply for grants? I thought I kind of picked up like it might have been something official that had to be done with somebody. And I'm not sure what that is.
That's a good question. That may have been part of the initial reasoning. I know there are certain like Main Street programs and grant opportunities that are tied to a downtown area, but as far as I know, we aren't actively pursuing any of those. But again, this code, it's been called the downtown station area for over a decade. It's just the zoning has been amended and expanded over time. Any other questions?
I think I share the same question. Why aren't we pursuing any grant funding if there's some available for that area?
I'll be honest, I'm not an expert in the opportunities that are out there, but if that's a direction of council, we'd be happy to look into it and bring some information forward.
So that would probably be something for us to bring up in our next study session and direct city manager to have the grant coordinator start researching grants available for creation of a downtown area. All right. Go ahead.
Two quick questions. One, on the slide on Target Area 2, you used a term I've never seen before, land assembly. I didn't know land had to be assembled.
It's a good question. That typically means a single owner or developer acquiring multiple properties to create a better area for redevelopment.
And in terms of the rezoning of Target Areas 2 and 4, when should we look to see that? What's the timeline on that?
The next step would be a study session discussion with City Council to get into more detail on the rezonings, which could take place in the next couple of months. And then based on council direction, the rezoning process would start.
Yeah, just to go back to a comment Patrick had made regarding potential rezoning aspects in Target Areas 2 and 4. Have we completed all the zoning changes required in Target Area 1?
Yes.
For the primary, so there's no more expectations currently to do any more zoning changes over there.
Right. The
I know we
recommendation.
expanded the area.
Exactly. The plan recommended expanding the form-based code that's in the purple area or station area west of 35. So that was approved in April 2023, which completed that step.
Okay, and I'd just like to switch back a little bit. You said that the I-35 was completed or approved in the 2021 year.
The plan was adopted in 2020.
Adopted in 2021,
Yes.
and that the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2023.
Correct.
Has there been any efforts to sort of marry the two with respect to any differences, the 2-year time difference, to sort of make sure that they're in alignment with each other?
Absolutely. That was definitely part of the comprehensive plan process. We used to have 3 separate comprehensive plans for the west, central, and east side of our city. Those were all adopted at different times. They didn't interact well. They were disjointed. So the plan replaced all of those, but it recognized that the I-35 study was current and aligned with the comp plan goals. And so it keeps that in place. The two coexist.
So would you say the I-35 plan is now congruent with the comp plan? When did that occur? Do you know when that was married together? Or?
When the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2023.
Okay, so you went back to the I-35 plan and made any adjustments necessary to marry it up with the comp plan?
Right.
Okay.
The comprehensive plan recommends implementing the I-35 plan, so it kind of adopts all of the same recommendations.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have for the minute.
Sure.
So Sarah, in terms of moving forward, does the delay in the I-35 project as it stands today, which is about 6 months, have any bearing on us moving forward with any other discussions related to what you presented?
There are no barriers that I would foresee. In fact, while the construction is ongoing, could be a really good time to look at the zoning in this area to sort of prepare the land for future development once the improvements are completed.
Okay. So just for everybody's benefit, as of Friday, I had a conversation with the TxDOT project engineer, and what was going to be December 2025 is now looking at probably June, July 2026 for this phase 2 in terms of being significantly completed. So, okay, anything else? Okay. So in the interest of time, we have one more item. We do have a hard stop at 6:45. So I'm going to move on to item C3, which is discuss vision, priorities, and collaboration between Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So I just want to repeat maybe some things that were said earlier in the meeting, and we could use this as our basis for moving forward. The Planning and Zoning Commission serves as an advisory capacity to the City Council. Your input is critical, and your recommendations help guide the council in making final decisions. It's important to remember that policy decisions rest solely with the City Council, and questions or discussions related to legislative intent, long-term policy direction, or budget authority fall under the council's purview. Commissioners are encouraged to ask questions that directly relate to land use, zoning, compliance, and development standards, areas within their charge. Commissioners should refrain from asking questions that go beyond that scope, particularly those aimed at council priorities, citywide strategy, or administrative matters. While transparency is always valued, commissioners are not required to explain their vote or justify their position during deliberations. The comprehensive plan is a guiding document and not a binding document. It does not lock the City Council into specific projects, but it does provide a framework for informed decision-making and growth. The comprehensive plan is a living document intended to be updated as conditions change. The Planning and Zoning Commission is the first line of review for major projects that shape our built environment. They are the advisory group to the City Council. And so, as I mentioned earlier, with anything that we do, anything that you all do, ask questions. That should be the mantra moving forward. Ask questions, because without information, we can't make good decisions. So, questions, comments regarding the vision, priorities, and collaboration between the two groups? Yes, sir.
Because this document is foundation document. It's a living document. Why or are we in a hurry to rezone any of this property? For example, there's a photo up there about a Pop Seeds restaurant. Restaurants are going out of business. And unless you guys know about somebody that's coming into town and they're trying to buy up some restaurant locations, why are we in a hurry to rezone? Or are we in a hurry to rezone?
That's a good question. I wouldn't categorize it as a hurry to rezone. I would say this is the next step that's recommended by the plan. And we do want to make sure that we're keeping up with, the plan recommendations so it doesn't fall out of use or just kind of sit on the shelf. But that is the intention for having discussion with City Council asking, is this the right time to rezone? And if it's not, then, and it isn't, and we'll bring it back at a future time. But zoning just kind of lays the groundwork. It allows for that development to occur in the future. It doesn't mean that a restaurant or retail development's coming in tomorrow, but it kind of lays the path for that to happen.
And I understand about the path. I'm just wondering, I don't know the answer to this. Does it affect property values? For example, if I owned an industrial building somewhere along I-35 and the city came in and they rezoned my property to retail, how does that affect my personal property? Or does it?
I would, it's a good question, and I would clarify that the intent would not to be remove any existing land uses. It would just be to add to them and broaden the scope. And a zoning change would not cause any existing business to cease or to come into conformance with new regulations. It would just be at the time that a site does redevelop, there's an expanded range of options.
Well, does it limit my ability to sell to my next door neighbor who also has a warehouse?
No, but if the site redevelops and they want to connect the buildings, or that's when the current or the new regulations would apply. So it may mean that you have to add more landscaping than you used to, or do something different with the facade treatment. But it wouldn't remove any uses that are currently existing.
Okay, so I could sell it to my neighbor who had an industrial building. Then he would own a property that prospectively was going to be rezoned retail. To what point? I mean, 40 years from that time, 30 years, as long as that building's in use. How? Explain that to me.
Yeah, any existing use, there are some uses out there that may not even conform to the current zoning regulations. Those are always allowed to continue until they are voluntarily stopped or redeveloped. And so even with sale of the property, that use could continue.
Well, I guess the real question is, if you rezoned it, do I have to sell it to a retail user?
No.
Okay.
May I clarify something, Sarah? So if it's rezoned to retail and you as the owner or the previous owner, whatever, that had the industrial use, and you want to upgrade your building, if you level that building, is it retail? Or do you have to build retail, or can you rebuild your building as industrial use?
It's a good question. The intention would be to retain the industrial uses that are currently allowed. What might change is the setbacks of the building, the amount of landscaping you have to put in. Those would need to come into compliance with the current zoning, whatever that is, whether it's the zoning that's in place now, or if council approves a rezoning, it would be that new zoning. But the use, we are not looking to remove property owner rights to develop or maintain their current uses.
So as I understand it, industrial operator A can upgrade his building. He could keep his building. He could sell his building to industrial operator B next door, who could keep the building and use it as industrial use, but having this retail, for lack of a better term, overlay component, the market's going to dictate whether he stays in business as a industrial user of that property or not. Right?
Right.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And so if the property becomes so valuable that it makes better sense to convert that property to retail use, restaurant, grocery store, whatever, then that's going to be up to the owner to make that decision, whether they want to do that and capitalize on that gain or not. Yes?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. So all we're doing is providing the component, so it's already in place that if they want to change to a retail type use, which is consistent with what some plan says, that's already in place.
Right. It provides a wider range of options for development that an owner may suddenly say, oh, I'm not limited to just industrial uses. I could look at options for restaurant, retail, if they want to, and if the market dictates, like you're saying. And what we can do when we bring this forward for a study session discussion is look at actual parcels in those areas and do some scenarios in terms of what that could look like. And we've done some of that analysis on the staff side.
So it sounds to me that we're not necessarily rezoning from one type of business to another, but rather allowing for or permitting, expanding, thank you, other opportunities for retail or other kinds of business in maybe the hopes of enticing businesses or whatnot that might be more conformance with the study plan or the plans that we have. That's my understanding. Am I missing something?
No, that's a good summary. The intention is to lay the groundwork for development to happen that aligns with the comp plan, but it's not to force that.
I think we just maybe the rezoning is kind of misleading. We're not really rezoning it. We're just maybe trying to allow some additional types of businesses.
So what I'm hearing is the current use would be grandfathered in, and then it would just enhance the opportunity for what could go into there.
Right.
There would not be any potential restrictions to the existing operations with the change.
Right. Right.
No matter if they needed to redevelop or add space in their current operation.
So if the site was redeveloping or expanding, the new zoning regulations would kick in. But again, that's not restricting uses. That
So
would
what
be,
would be removed from the current? Are you saying that we're going to remove the existing warehouse designation and say it can no longer be warehouse, it needs to now be retail, entertainment, office space?
no. So the zoning in this area right now is a planned development. It's PD 70, covers that whole corridor, and it has a list of allowed uses. It includes warehousing. It's mostly industrial type uses right now. No residential is allowed. There are development restrictions in place. What the plan recommends is modifying that current zoning to expand the list of uses. So rather than just industrial, it'd be industrial, retail, restaurant, entertainment uses. Put those allowances in place so that they can more easily go into that area without having to come and do a rezoning or an SUP or go through a long development process. It would also change some of the landscaping standards. Maybe building setbacks would modify a little bit. Slight enhancements to the appearance of the site so that when an existing building is removed, what comes back in its place meets the intent of the code. Does that make sense? It would be at the point of voluntary redevelopment. It would not be, we approved this zoning, suddenly everybody that owns a property out there has to go plant 5 trees and tear down half their building, nothing like that. It would just be for redevelopment.
When you say voluntary, is the city doing anything actively to encourage encourage this, or is it all going to be pushed by the market?
Currently, it's market driven. We do have the facade incentive program that any property owner can apply for. But currently it would be market driven. Right. But there may be other opportunities at council's discretion to incentivize redevelopment in that area or contribute towards public improvements. It really just depends on their direction.
No, I was just going to summarize what he was saying. It sounds like what you were asking was whether there was going to be additional restrictions required after the rezoning. And what I'm hearing is yes. Depending on what you're doing, particularly if it's a rezoning, there's going to be some additional requirements. And we would just hope that the additional requirements aren't going to be so stringent that it's going to prohibit the current activity. And I think maybe that's where some of the commissioners are headed. We just want to make sure that what we're doing is not going to, those additional enhancements or requirements aren't going to prohibit that business from operating in the future or make it increasingly difficult for them to continue or expensive to do that remodeling or rezoning, whatever they're doing.
That's correct.
So I want to take just a quick detour, and that is when changes like this are being discussed, okay? We already took steps to increase the notification boundaries to 300 feet, but still, we're talking about decisions that are going to have direct implications to the value of property, okay? How is that going to be communicated to the whole area? Say these areas of opportunity 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So the first step would be that study session discussion with council. That provides an early opportunity for the information to be made public. Typically, we don't notify for study session discussions, but we would notify for a public hearing if that's the direction that this moves. And so every owner within the study area would receive a letter. That information and the discussion from study session would be public. The staff team would make ourselves available to answer any questions. It's a similar process that we went through when the PD 86 area was expanded. We got a lot of questions from owners that wanted to know the exact things that y'all are asking. Does my property value decrease with this change? Will I have to cease my operations? What does this mean for my future development options? And so certainly we would be prepared to have those conversations with property owners.
Okay, my confidence level is low in terms of letters being delivered to the decision maker, let's say. If the owner and decision maker doesn't get notification and the receptionist or secretary is the one who opens the mail and sees it, oh, there's junk mail from the city and tosses it, then they're not informed. They don't know what's going on. Because this has such an impact on the future of the city, I would hope that the city can have some type of marketing discussion as to how things like this are handled moving forward. We might have to hire a team of people to go out and make in-person business calls just to assure that we've gotten to every property owner or decision maker. I'm just not sure that the sign and a letter is what's going to help get us to the point that we need to get to. And nobody wants to be surprised in terms of decisions being made about property they own or future decisions being made. So that's just 2 cents for thought.
That's good.
I was just going to say that we might need to encourage economic development involvement so that they can assist us with who else might need to be notified or could be helpful.
That's good feedback.
Just encourage economic development to participate.
You said we had a lot of response when we were developing these plans, over 500 responses, and then you highlighted stakeholders. What is a stakeholder specifically?
And those were one-on-one discussions with property owners in that area to get feedback from them and talk through the study. And so that's certainly an option that we could look at again, is holding one-on-one sessions or holding an informational meeting where property owners could come and learn about the proposed rezoning or ask questions. We would also, of course, want to develop a communication plan that would involve social media and other methods besides the letters and the signs. That's great feedback. Certainly something that we will strive for.
I may be really late to the game, but I see that a lot of this is focused on transit. We're talking about taking money away from DART because they are not meeting our expectations. My understanding is that a lot of people don't actually use the train, and I don't think I've ever seen a shopping strip be called downtown. I'm wondering if there's anything, am I missing something? Are we expecting more people to take the train? Are we expecting people to come in on the train to come into this shopping strip that we're now calling downtown?
So the downtown area would expand beyond just the retail area on Long Beach Street. It's meant to be the entire district, and that area includes the Star Center, includes where potential multifamily or more density could come in at some point. And so while it doesn't function as what you would think of as a downtown right now, the potential is there. I think is the idea of the code, and it encourages a mix of uses. It allows for tall, dense buildings to be constructed, and it's centralized along that DART station. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's functioning that way right now. It's a good point.
Thank you.
Okay. We do have a hard stop, 6:45, so I want to thank everybody for coming out here this evening. Thank you to those who are tuning in and watching. Sarah, I would ask that you have continued educational sessions with both council and P&Z as items like this are discussed, because we can both learn from it. It's very important. So with that,
we will adjourn. It is presently 6:44 p.m.
all right, and the city council will adjourn its meeting at 6:44 also. Thank you all very much.